Can you see my screen?
Yes, madam. You can see it.
Right. Knowledge area 2 is about human senses and sensory evaluation of food. As we have covered from knowledge area 1, we know that sensory evaluation involves analysis of sensory characteristics of food. And characteristics are like taste, smell, color, whereby that include vision and texture. So this knowledge area covers the human senses that involve in the sensory evaluation. The human senses, sorry. May be described as the physiological perception of a stimulus. So it is a physiological perception of a stimulus. You need to be stimulated with a certain sensory characteristics. These sensory characteristics include sight, whereby it is vision. You can see the color of the food, but also hearing, the sound that can be produced by a certain food. For example, when we are talking about like a fresh apple, when you bite an apple, you can hear a certain sound of an apple, and that is the freshness of the apple. Yes.
Sorry, madam.
Yes. I cannot hear you.
Hello?
I'm listening. Yes, go on.
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, madam, we can hear you.
But someone stopped me, so I don't know what's wrong. Or maybe he has any suggestion, something, or what? Can I proceed?
Yes, we can proceed, madam. I think the network has a problem in his place.
Okay. So the senses include hearing, as I've said, like the sound that apple can make, or food like when we are talking. Hello? Like taste. Another is taste, and this includes the sweetness or maybe sourness or bitterness, and also smell and touch. When we are talking about the sense of touch, is like temperature, whereby you can feel like the tea, it is hot, or even the pain or pressure, like when you press unripe mango, you can sense that it is hard, so it is pressure. Sorry, I'm going through the chat. I think you can see that I'm reading the chat here. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, madam. I think the network, where he is there.
Okay, because I wanted to change it because I'm using my home Wi-Fi, so I wanted to change to the phone. Maybe if then my network is not stable, so I don't know if it is mine or his.
I think the problem for that girl.
Okay. A combination of these senses enables humans to evaluate and characterize a food. For all animals, the senses are necessity to get food, protect against mortal danger, etc. There is no instrument that can replace or replicate the human sense. Therefore, it is important for sensory professionals to have some understanding of the biological mechanisms involved in perception. We're talking about smelling. What is it happening so that you can smell something? Or about taste. What is happening so that you can feel that this juice is sweet, or this maybe grilled meat is salty, or it has a nice flavor. So all those kind of sensation, you need to understand a little bit on how the mechanism involved in the perception of those senses. So how our senses work. A sense experiences is dependent of signals originating from the compound or the object which is noticed. And that is what we call stimulation. That you need to see a certain object or compound or food, I can say, and in order for you to be stimulated. Maybe it is the color of the juice or the package of the yogurt. And another issue is about the signals which are coded in our senses, whereby after you have seen a certain object and being stimulated, the signals are coded in the sense organs to tidings which are transported in our nervous system to the brain. And that is what is called information transfer, that you need to be stimulated, and then the signals are coded in our sense organs, and then the information is being transferred to the brain so that the brain can detect and respond to that signal and evaluate and interpret and get that interpretation that this object is in red color, or this juice is sweet, or this, so all those sensory attributes we are talking about. So in order that mechanism to take place, three things must happen: the stimulation, the information transfer from the sense organ to the brain, and then the brain will decode, evaluate, and interpret, and that's where you get a response and understand the characteristics which it is actual for that particular object. However, explanation of how the decoding actually is performed in the body is still in the darkness. We don't know really what's happening, the mechanism in our body, but we understand that we need to be stimulated and the information needs to be transferred to the brain, and then the brain can interpret that information. Studies of receptors or receiving cells in the sense organs have indicated that they have thread-like offshores, so sometimes known as antennas. So those antennas are the ones that can receive the information and then transfer the information to the brain. Our senses for smell and taste have specific seats in their antennas, which fit the chemical configuration of the single compound. When this compound is absorbed, it creates an electrical current which may be stronger or weaker in the receiving cells and through synaptic contacts towards the central nervous system. So that is the mechanism which can take place when maybe you want to test, to evaluate a certain taste of a food. We need to be very careful when we are talking about taste and when we are talking about testing, like, like evaluating. So here I'm talking about taste, about the flavor. One of the sensory attributes is vision. Vision is especially important in many of our decisions in daily life and in judging food products. The sight of a product is usually the first contact with a product and is of a major importance for the first buyer. We are doing that evaluation when we are going to the market. If you are going to a local market, maybe to buy carrots, and you can see a fresh carrot and a carrot which is not fresh, you can see the skin, can say the outer part of that carrot will start to have not a pleasing color, even the way the skin will look like, the texture. Maybe some can be started to shrink, lose some moisture. So just by vision, you can tell that this carrot is good or is fresh than the other. So you can see how vision is very important in the analysis of a product. Apart from just determining the freshness of vegetables, but also the color of all the packaging, you can have similar products packaged in a different form. An object is determined by the sense of vision. Light waves reflected by an object enter the eye and fall onto the retina. The retina in the eye contains receptor cells, rods and cones, which convert this light energy into neutral impulses that travel via the optic nerve to the brain. Cones are responsive to different wavelengths of light relating to color. So that's how, or that's where our eyes can differentiate between colors because of the presence of cones. Rods respond positively to white light and relay information concerning the lightness of the color. The brain interprets these signals and we perceive the appearance, the color, the shape, the size, translucence, surface texture, etc. And all those characteristics I've explained it. For example, the bottles I've already mentioned, the color I've mentioned of the juice, the surface texture, I've given you the example of a fresh carrot. So you can see how the vision is very important as far as sensory evaluation is concerned. Are we together?
Yes, madam.
Now we are moving to the sense of taste. The sense of taste involves the perception of non-volatile substances which, when dissolved in water, oil or saliva, are detected by taste receptors in the taste buds located on the surface of the tongue and other areas of the mouth or throat. Taste is the sensation that occurs in the mouth when a substance reacts chemically with the taste receptor. And these receptor cells are located on the taste buds or papillae. So when we are talking about the tongue has receptor cells, and those are the ones that are used in evaluating or detecting the sensory characteristics of the sense of taste. Sensation can be divided into 4 different classical taste qualities, and these are salty, sweet, sour, bitter, and the additional of umami. The situation of the cells on the tongue therefore forces a judge to keep the tongue and the mouth cavity in good contact with the sample. Because here now you are going, I'm explaining in relation to sensory evaluation and not when you are eating food, because when you are eating, you are just eating food. You find that the food is yummy, delicious, and then you eat fast maybe. You are not doing any sensory evaluation or analysis. But if you want to judge, then keep the tongue and the mouth cavity in good contact with the sample. Taste so long that the tasting compounds are in good contact. Produce spit enough to dissolve the flavor component, and rinse the mouth to get rid of all remains of the sample. So you have to do this, to practice this in order to be able to taste the flavor or what you want to characterize in that particular food or object. The senses of taste respond to stimuli both quantitatively and qualitatively. When you're talking about quantitatively and qualitative, it's like, is it sweet, but how sweet? I know you can detect something which is a little bit sweet. You can say maybe this tea, the sugar is not enough. That means that is when we are talking the quantitative level of the sugar in the tea. So the senses of taste respond to stimuli both quantitatively and qualitatively. The ability of recognizing small amounts of primaries may vary between individuals. So, and this can be observed maybe even by yourself. When you are not well, when you are sick, when you are having malaria, you can see that your taste buds are not working normal. So you cannot even differentiate maybe a small amount of sweetness, or you cannot even feel the sweetness at all from a particular food. And that's where people are saying that the food is tasteless. But the issue is not the food, it is the physiological situation of a person who is eating that particular food. So the ability of recognizing small amounts of primaries may vary between individuals, and these differences are affected by sex. When you compare to male and female, smoking habits also affect the ability to recognize the concentration level of taste, but also the age and illness. And there are terminologies, I can say, which you need to understand in order to be able to discuss the sensory evaluation results. The first is threshold value. Threshold value is the smallest concentration of a compound an individual is able to detect. Another is sensitivity threshold. At a certain concentration, a person will taste something more than water, but cannot specify the taste. Like if there is a water and I add a little bit of sugar, you will taste that it is not the normal water. There's something in it, but you cannot tell what is in it because of the concentration. That concentration is too small so that you cannot specify what is the taste. Recognizing threshold. At a certain concentration, a person is able to recognize a particular taste, for example, sweet or salty, etc. For example, if we are serving pure water and adding more and more sugar, so you add a little bit and somebody can taste, and then you continue adding a little amount of sugar. The person under investigation will at the beginning only taste water because at first it is pure water. At a certain concentration, he will taste something more than water, but he cannot specify the taste. At this point, he has reached his sensitivity threshold. That's the smallest concentration whereby he can say that this is not water. There is something in it, although he cannot say specifically or recognize specifically what is in it. Actually dependent upon the concentration itself. Are we together? Hello?
Yes, madam, we are together.
So experts in the examination, you can be asked to define those recognizing threshold value, sensitivity, and similar items like that. Chemical basis for the 5 primaries. We are still on the issue of sense of taste. And the 5 primaries are salt. That is the first one. All chemicals which can be splitted into ions taste salt. For example, sodium chloride is considered to possess a very pure salt taste, but also potassium chloride. Salt plays 2 very important roles in flavoring a dish. Firstly, it balances against bitterness, and I think we know that. Anyone can give me an example where salt is used to balance against bitterness or a bit of sourness? You have to think, and you can search and come up with an example. Secondly, it enhances most other flavor present in the dish, particularly sweetness. So the first one is salt. The second one is sourness. This is also known as tartness. This is a function of hydrogen ion concentration, pH, for example, citric acid, phosphoric acid. Sourness is related to acidity and is sensed by hydrogen ion channels in the tongue, which detect the concentration of hydronium ions that are formed from acids and water in the mouth. Sour taste is acceptable when mild, but becomes unpleasant when strong. In humans, acids include induced salivation, which increases bicarbonate secretions, the major buffering agent in saliva. Another chemical is sweetness. Different substances serve as a stimuli. It's produced by a variety of ionized and non-ionized aliphatic hydroxyl compounds. For example, sucrose, glucose, and aspartame. Have you studied the carbohydrates? Not yet. Are you doing OFD 203, food chemistry? Are you doing that course, or you have already covered that course?
We are doing it, 203.
Okay. So you will cover all the information with regard to carbohydrates and sucrose, glucose, galactose, fructose there in OFD 203. Sweet tastes are generally regarded as pleasurable. For example, honey, cakes, sweet potatoes, etc. Another chemical base is bitterness. Bitterness can be described as a sharp, pungent, or disagreeable flavor. Alkaloid compounds such as caffeine, quinine, or nicotine produce the typical bitter stimuli. For example, cocoa and dark green vegetables. The taste buds for the bitter taste are especially deep, so the sensation takes longer to be perceived, but tends to remain longer in the mouth. The fifth one is umami. Umami is derived from 3 natural substances: glutamate, guanylate, and inosinate. Glutamate is the most common umami compound and occurs naturally in a wide variety of ingredients. Guanylate found mainly in plants and fungi, and inosinate found mainly in meat, fish, and seaweed. Umami is also known as savory or meat taste. Our taste receptors pick up umami from foods that contain high levels of amino acid glutamate. The role of these umami compounds is mainly to do with mouthfeel, adding body to the culinary experience, and in the case of roasted meats, umami has a deep broth-like taste. So umami, I cannot explain it, but there is a certain flavor. It's like a mixture of flavor. For example, if you have used the noodles, they call it like 2 minutes noodles, the one that you can buy from the supermarket. They usually have a certain flavor in a sachet where you have to add that flavor in the noodles when you are preparing them. That flavor is like savory or like meaty taste, so it's a mixture of some flavor, and that is the one which is called umami. Can be sensed on all parts of the tongue. So generally, the 5 tastes can be sensed on all parts of the tongue, although the sides are more sensitive than the middle. So you can have the parts of the tongue which are very sensitive compared to others. They can also be sensitive to a certain attribute like sweet or salt or umami compared to the other. Although all the 5 tastes can be sensed on all parts of the tongue. About half of the sensory cells in taste buds react to several of the 5 basic tastes. The cells differ in their level of sensitivity. So what matters is the level of sensitivity. So that's why they are like section in the tongue that shows how they are sensitive to a certain taste. Each has a specific palette of tastes with a fixed ranking. So some cells may be more sensitive to sweet, followed by bitter, sour, and salty, while others have their own ranks. The full experience of a flavor is produced only after all of the information from the different parts of the tongue is combined. So, and the information has been sent to the brain, whereby the brain can interpret the flavor in general. So that is a diagram of a human tongue, illustrating areas traditionally associated with the 5 basic tastes: the sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. But remember, we have said that all senses can be tested in the tongue, in the whole tongue, but there are specific areas that are very sensitive to a certain characteristics. So that is the image. I just got it from the internet. You can also search and you will see it and get another information from the internet. The sense of smell. Volatile molecules are sensed by olfactory receptors on the millions of hair-like cilia that cover the nasal epithelium. So now we are talking about the smell, so we are talking about the nose. So the nose, inside the nose, we all know that there are hair-like cilia that covers the nasal epithelium located in the roof of the nasal cavity. For something to have an odor or aroma, volatile molecules must be transported in air to the nose. Volatile molecules enter the nose or through the nasal during breathing or sniffing, or retronasal via the back of the throat during eating. There are around 17,000 different volatile compounds. A particular odor may be made up of several volatile compounds. Sometimes particular volatiles can be associated with a particular smell, for example, isoamyl acetate and banana or pear drops. Individuals may perceive and or describe single compounds differently. For example, hexanol can be described as green, others grass, others unripe, and I'm sure you all know if there is, for example, taking example, if there are mangoes, you can just tell the unripe mango because of the smell. You can smell that this mango is not ripened, and you can also know the one which is full ripened mango by the smell. The olfactory receptors in humans are located in the upper part to the nasal cavity and away from the major flow of respired air. Under normal breathing, only 5% of air reaches the receptors. Sniffing will increase the amount to 20% of the respired air. It is therefore of importance to sniff deeply when you are going to smell a foodstuff, when you are doing sensory evaluation. The sense of smell is highly exposed to adaptation. When we are saying that it is highly exposed to adaptation is, for example, like if you are in a room and somebody come in with a cup of coffee, you will all smell that he or she is taking coffee. But after a certain period of time, our nose will adapt that smell and you will no longer smell that coffee. It is not that coffee is not there, but then our nose undergoes fatigue very easily, very fast. That's why the analysis of smell is very, very sensitive, and you need to really control the environmental where you're going to do this sense of smell analysis, because the sense of smell is highly exposed to adaptation. And this is not only to the smell of food, but smell of any other thing. When you are near the maybe rubbish bin, you can smell the bad smelling. But if you will stay there for 1 hour or 2, then you will no longer feeling that smell. And another issue that the sense of smell is highly affected by hunger or satiety. So somebody needs to be not in a hunger or satiety condition in order to be able to analyze the sense of smell. Hormones will also influence both the sensitivity for different smells and the liking of the odors. But generally, we know how the sense of smell differs from one person to another. And that's where, when it comes, for example, even when buying perfumes, you can find someone likes another one, someone like, oh, I don't like that kind of smell, I like the other one. So the liking of the odor is also different from a person to person. The sense of touch. When we're talking about touch, we have 3 main issues: synesthesis, kinesthesis, and chemesthesis. Synesthesis, the skin includes the lips, tongue, and surfaces of the oral cavity, contains many different tactile receptors that can detect sensation related to contact or touch. For example, the forces or the particle size. So when you are taking something which, even if you close your eyes and take sugar, you will feel that this is sugar, yes, it is sweet, but the particle size you can taste, you can feel that they are different when you are having a fine sugar and when you are having a coarse sugar. So that is where we are talking about synesthesis. And when you're talking about kinesthesis, nerve fibers in the muscles, tendons, and joints sense tension and relaxation in the muscles, allowing the perception of attributes such as heaviness and hardness. Let's go to, for example, the fruits. Unripe fruits will be hard. So you can just feel by touch, because remember that we are in the sense of touch. So you can feel the particle size through touching, or through being in contact with an object, where you feel that this is coarse salt, this is fine salt. But also you can also perceive different attributes such as heaviness or hardness. And this is kinesthesis. It's like the pressure, the kinetic issues. And when you're talking about kinesthesis, it's the chemical substances. Some chemical substances can stimulate the trigeminal nerves situated in the skin, mouth, and nose to give the hot, burning, tingling, cooling, or astringent sensation. For example, when you are taking a fizzy drink like Coca-Cola, you can have that feeling of like tingling or cooling. That's the fizzy feeling of the carbon dioxide in it. But also when you are taking maybe the chewing gum, the menthol, when you chew the chewing gum, you can feel something like it is like cold stuff, cooling, something like that. So that is kinesthesis, the sense of touch. So when you are talking or discussing about the sense of touch, you can give examples of these three issues: the issue of the chemical, the issue of heaviness or hardness, and the issue of some stresses, which I've talking to you at first, and that will show that you understand the whole thing of the sense of touch. When you are asked to explain the sense of touch, we expect that you will include these three characteristics. Are we together?
Yes, madam.
Am I alone, or can you hear me?
We are together, madam.
Another sense is the sounding, hearing. Sound is sensed by millions of tiny hair cells in the ear that are stimulated by the vibration of air from sound waves, the noise created when touching or stroking objects, the noise emitted by food during eating contributes to the perceived texture of a food. These things are very common. It's only that maybe you didn't know that it's about the sensory attribute of food. When you're talking about sound, for example, crispness of an apple and fizz of a carbonated drink, you can hear a certain sound in it. So for a few products like crackers, the sound while eating may be of importance. The most common also example is like cashew nuts. You know, the cashew nuts, they're not supposed to absorb moisture, right? If they absorb moisture, that sound which is producing when you bite a cashew nut will not be there. So a freshness of a cashew nut, you need to hear that sound like it is cracking. And that is very, very important as well, as far as cashew nuts characteristics or quality is concerned. So that's where we are talking about sound as sensory attribute. And that is the end of our this evening lecture. Thank you very much.